Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jan Mercer-Toms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. We're an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. Today, you're watching our Women in Money series brought to you each and every week. Please make sure to join us at joinmayshad.com, where you can learn about all of our upcoming content, our shows, our workshops, and how you too can become a part of revolutionizing how professional women network. I cannot tell you how thrilled and excited I am to introduce our guest of honor speaker today. She's a professor, an author, a keynote speaker, and the president and co-founder of Take the Lead. Welcome, Gloria Feldt. Hi, Gloria.
Thank you, Jan. I am so happy to be here with you.
First of all, I'm so excited to see you. It's been far too long. And Gloria and I were just talking before the show that one of the last times that we saw each other in person was a few months before COVID, celebrating the anniversary of Take the Lead. And Gloria, I want to hear all about that too, all of the exciting things that you're working on to support women professionally and personally. And 4 years ago, we were also together at pretty much this exact time. Because Gloria, you were a guest on a show that I produced, a live event series actually leading up to the election called From All Sides of the Spectrum, What Women Really Want to Be Talking About During This Election Year. And here we are.
And here we are.
We're still talking.
And we have another election year, so we are.
Still talking and fighting the good fight. Gloria, I would love to hear in the last 4 years, given the sense of what was happening in that moment in time versus what we're seeing now, what's changed as we think about equality for women? What's changed and what hasn't changed? Where are the opportunities over the next 4 years?
Well, there are many days when I have this sense that we are on parallel tracks going forward and backward at the same time. It's like, it feels like, first of all, every day I see some incredible first for a woman, or second, or even better yet, second, third, or fourth for a woman. So it's not even no longer just a first. And then at the same time, we've seen a number of setbacks legislatively. We still don't have the Equal Rights Amendment. We still don't have equal pay legislation. We still don't, there are many things that we have not yet accomplished. So there's plenty of work left to do. At the same time, women have advanced quite a bit. When I started Take the Lead now 7 years ago, I did it based on research that had found that women were at 18% of the top leadership positions across just about every sector. I mean, there was not one single sector of the economy where women had broken the 20% mark in upper leadership. Although at that point, we were half the workforce. We were earning the majority of college degrees. We were the main purchasers of almost everything. We had so many things going for us, but we were just not breaking through that leadership barrier, whatever it might be. And now we are really pushing on 25%. We are at 25% in Congress. We are in across the board in most sectors, we are somewhere between 23 and 25%. So, that's not small. And I truly believe that once we hit 25, it will be much easier and faster to double that to 50%. And that's where we want to go. I want to see 50%, 50-50 in leadership by 2025. That is the mission of Take the Lead. And we need to do that because, I've been doing this work a long time. And I need to see it in my lifetime. So we have to go by 2025. That's it. Done.
I'm determined to help you get there. And all of us at Mayshad are standing with you in that sense as well. Gloria, it's really something that you mentioned around, women are earning the majority of college degrees, and yet the ways in which then that doesn't play out to pay parity in the workplace. Mm-hmm. What are some of the reasons that help to explain why that disconnect, that delta still exists?
Mm-hmm. There are several reasons. And the thing is that you can change laws and you can open doors, but that doesn't mean that the culture changes. And as they say, culture eats strategy for lunch every day. And it is much harder to change culture and what's in our minds. And just, we're accustomed to doing things the way we do them. So number one, women don't ask for as much. I don't know what you call it, website, ZipRecruiter. I don't know what the name is for that kind of a website where people can put their resumes and people can put their job openings. But ZipRecruiter crunched their numbers, hundreds of thousands of resumes and of people seeking jobs. And they found that women on average asked $11,000 less for exactly the same jobs matched against men's requests of what they said they should earn for that job. So you first have to know your value. And I think a big part of this is that women don't always know our value. And one of the things we really need to learn that we work on at Take the Lead is you need to know your value and you need to know what other people are earning in that same position that you're aspiring to or the position that you're in. And then you need to go and ask for it and ask for it with that data in your hand. So number one, women have to ask. You don't ask, you don't get, my daddy used to say over and over. Actually, my father used to say, she who asks gets.
I love that.
I didn't realize how good that was to have a father putting the female pronoun, but it made an impact on me. So that's one thing, is that we have to ask. The second thing is what I learned from the research that I did for my book, No Excuses, 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power, is that women and men are simply socialized differently around power and intention. And if you don't see yourself being able to do a particular job or wanting to do it, you don't know that you can do it and you don't put yourself forward for it. And let's face it, when women are ambitious and intentional, they are often, like we're seeing with Kamala Harris right now, the pundits are saying, oh, well, she's so ambitious. Probably Biden shouldn't have chosen her. Well, hasn't Biden been running for president for the last 30 years? Is that something? Do we not notice that? No, we don't notice it because it's assumed that a man will be ambitious, and it's supported that a man will be ambitious. So we have to change those gender stereotypes, and you only change the gender stereotypes by doing something that changes it. So the more we see women in leadership, the more normal it becomes, and the more we'll be able to make that change. But it is going to require a generation of women willing to stick their necks out, put their heads up, and say, I want to be the CEO. I want to be the VP. I want to be the COO. And then they stick with it and they stay there.
Gloria, do you also think that there's a part of this where we're also socialized as women that we need to have perfection and complete mastery of something before we take that risk and actually raise our hand? And particularly right now, given the fact that we're living in a world of uncertainty, if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's taught us that change is here. Mm-hmm. And we have to be on that change boat, whether individually, collectively with our families and with our teams, or with our society in general. Mm-hmm. But one thing, what do you think about that in the sense of just how can we use this time to really reflect and think about, okay, so the world's never been perfect, but we're seeing now a complete disruption in so many different areas that now could be the perfect time for women to feel the need to be less perfect before taking that risk and raising their hand.
Well, certainly doing Zoom calls all day, we have all learned that we don't have to be perfect except just what's on the screen. And I think that's certainly true. No, what you're referencing right now is really a good example of exactly what I'm saying about the difference in socialization between women and men around power and intention. Because the socialization that girls get, even now, it's much better. Oh my goodness, this is one of the things that's changed for the much better. Because I think parents are much more attuned now to trying to help their girls to see themselves as powerful and capable, and being able to play sports has made a big difference for a whole generation of women, and will continue to do so. But what you have stated, that women feel a need to be perfect, is still true. It's part of our socialization. We are rewarded from the time we are born for being still, being sweet, being pretty. And, that's, if you were a boy, you'd be rewarded for making noise and being strong And, this is baked into our culture so profoundly that it's just very hard for us to overcome it. So you're absolutely right. I notice, when I'm doing, when I've turned my curriculum into an online course for one thing, and I notice that when I do that course where people can just sign up regardless of who they are and wherever they may be in their careers, I get astounded every time. In my mind, I'm gearing it toward the mid-career woman. In my mind, I'm astounded every time that CEOs, corporate counsel, owners of businesses, women who are incredible and can probably do anything they wanted to do, still think they need to know more, still think they need to learn more. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's a good characteristic. Which brings me to something I want to say, which is that I truly believe that this socialization now in the pandemic and after is what is giving us the superpowers that we need. And that little bit of resistance to taking risks immediately without thinking, guess what? That's one of the reasons why companies with more women in their leadership make more money. It's why you see these countries that are run by women. There are only 19 of them. But they have all done better with COVID than the rest of the world. And it has to do with that socialization that gives us this, we question, we think, we want to get the facts, we want to know the information before we actually take action. That turns out to be a superpower.
I love the way you just said that. And I love claiming that superpower for us. I want to go back to something you said in our opening remarks as well. The fact that you get excited when you see not a first, not a second, maybe a third, definitely a fourth or a fifth. And I think in the past, so much of progress in terms of getting excited and championing and celebrating something had to do when a woman got to that first spot, no matter what that was, right? But I think that this is also an important reflection for companies to think about, particularly as they're thinking about how to continue to build culture and to be a best-in-class workplace because of COVID, because of the racial inequalities in the United States, because of all these things that are coming to service, even more intensified now because of COVID. But the importance of companies not just thinking about achieving data, for example, X number of women on a board or X number of women in senior management, but how are you promoting? How are you hiring? How are you recruiting? How are you, onboarding? How are you mentoring? How are you rewarding? How are you promoting women at all different levels? And we often don't think about that, right? Like there's often just who's going to be first, who's going to be second, but not then how are you promoting from within to ensure that women at all levels can achieve equality and parity.
Right. Yes. It does start. You got to begin at the beginning, and it does begin. We were talking about the socialization of girls. I mean, it starts there with girls wanting to aspire to leadership, whatever leadership might be in their minds. I mean, not everybody has to be a CEO. Let's face it, but we are all the CEOs of our own lives, and we need to be thinking that way. And thinking intentionally about what matters to us, and therefore what do we want this one precious life to actually hold and to mean. And we don't tend to be socialized quite that way. It's more like one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. It's easy to think, because we have seen a woman first almost everything, that there are no more problems, or that there's no more discrimination, there's no more implicit bias holding women back. And there are systemic issues too that we need to think about. I mean, I think the pandemic has certainly brought home a couple of things. One is that the preponderance of the quote essential workers are low paid female workers, the daycare workers, the nurses, the cashiers at the grocery store. This is come, we can see this now. This is laid bare that women have been kind of shuffled into those jobs. But we as women have to say, yeah, well, I want to be the grocery store manager. I want to do this. You have to be working it both ways all the time. I mean, you have to be working the systems change from the top down, but you have to also be working from the bottom up. And I think that if I could just say one thing in answer to your question, it would be if every woman will simply bring another woman along with her, that can change everything pretty quickly.
I love the fact that the mission behind Take the Lead is live life without limits. Talk to us about the inspiration behind that.
Well, I will tell you that where that comes from actually is when I wrote No Excuses, 9 Ways Women Can Change How We Think About Power. My title for the book was Unlimited. The marketers got in the act and decided that it had to be more strident and it needed to be, and they came up with the title No Excuses. So I persuaded them to keep that subtitle and lead an unlimited life, because I really do think that if women will take the opportunities that we have for us, that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it just gets handed to you. But it does mean that we, at least in the United States and in most of the Western European countries and the developed countries of the world, only if you choose not to have your voice heard is your voice not heard. We are educated. We have as much ability, but we have to be willing to step out and take those risks. And that's been the barrier. We have to change. And that's why I say we have to change how we're thinking about power. And that, I think, makes us limitless. That enables us to lead a life where there are no limits that have been imposed on us. Now, we're going to choose how we spend each day. And there are limits. Nobody can do everything. And certainly nobody can do everything every day. But the point of leading an unlimited life is that those are not limits that other people are putting on you. You are setting your own boundaries based on your values, what your passions are, and what will fulfill you in your life. And I think we can do that.
I know we can, Gloria. I think it's really interesting when you talk about the word power, because even when we start talking about this at the beginning of the show, even for myself, it conjures up negative associations. I think particularly right now during an election year where there's a lot of power struggles happening and power debates. And no matter what side of the political fence that you sit on, that can get pretty ugly in the sense of how we see it all play out in the media. When we think about power as women, we often associate it to be a very masculine trait, and often one that doesn't then show empathy and understanding and genuineness and transparency. So how do we as a culture and how do we as leaders within companies start to shift our mindset in the sense of moving away just from the associations that we place on the word itself?
Mm-hmm. It's time for a complete paradigm shift of how we're thinking about power. It's really past time for that. Let's face it, the narratives of history have been written in hyper-masculinized terms of war, fighting, scarce resources, finite pies. But the truth is that power itself has no attributes. And so we think about those negatives as being what power is, but as a power over people or things or resources. But the truth is that power itself is like a hammer. You can build something with it or you can break something apart. It's what you do with it that matters. And so if we can shift our thinking about it to being the power to accomplish good things, to innovate, to create, to make life better for our families, our companies, our cultures, the world, we can really change. I mean, we can really just shift how we are using power. And I think that will impact the leadership of companies and certainly of countries if we think about power in that way. Now, you cannot be a good leader without using power. Let me say that. And I don't want women to think that they should back away from using power. Quite the contrary. I want you to embrace your power. But it's about what do you use that power to that counts. And really, things that, I mean, like there's no limit, there's no finite pie when it comes to intelligence or innovation, creativity, love, the things that really make us human. So I think it will take women to lead toward that kind of a culture, frankly. I think it will take women in sufficient numbers. And that means, again, we come back to needing equality and equity and parity in leadership. When we have that, I think our culture as a whole will start to make that shift.
Gloria, in 2020, we celebrate and experience many different things.
Yes, it's been quite a year.
Quite a year.
It's not over.
It's not over. We still have back to school, the holidays, the election, and year end to get through. It's fascinating because this year, as we know, we mark the 100th year of the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And yet we know that things haven't necessarily gone according to plan. And we see, voices and individuals being suppressed. We see voter suppression as a true possibility in this election again. Let's discuss this. What do you think is happening in the sense of, why haven't we been able to realize our full rights as a gender?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about the suffrage amendment is that by the time it had passed, I mean, it took 70 some odd years for the suffragists to finally get the 19th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. And it's a very simple amendment. It just says that the right of individuals to vote will not be abridged by virtue of sex or something. I mean, it's a very simple statement. And yet, it preceded the advent of a lot of Jim Crow laws that kept both Black men and women from voting. It wasn't caused, the 19th Amendment didn't cause those things to happen. But again, it was a cultural thing that kept going on. The women who won the right to vote made the critical mistake that should never be made in a democracy, which is to believe that something is won forever. Nothing is ever won forever in a democracy. You have to keep fighting forward, I like to say. You can't just wait and try to protect your gains. You have to keep moving forward with a proactive agenda. They did not do that. Only Alice Paul, one of the suffragists of the time, realized that they needed to always carry a proactive agenda forward. And she wrote the Equal Rights Amendment, get this, in 1923. The Equal Rights Amendment that still hasn't been ratified into the Constitution, okay? So there were some people who understood that you need to keep an agenda in front of the people so that people have something to organize around and keep a movement vibrant and keep it moving. And so that was a big mistake of the suffrage movement. It was not to use the political power that they had amassed in order to move an agenda forward. And so as a consequence, we began to see these voter suppression measures instituted all over the country that started a long time. It actually started before the 19th Amendment passed, but certainly throughout the 20th century, we saw poll taxes. We saw, there were laws that prevented Asian Americans from voting. There were laws that prevented indigenous people from voting. So that didn't get cleaned up until the 1940s and 50s, and finally with the Voting Rights Act in 1965, that most of those laws were tossed out. But again, came the reaction. And here again, we are seeing methods of people trying to suppress the vote. And it is going to be incumbent upon each and every citizen in the United States to make sure that they are registered, that they are registered properly, that they get their ballot. And if they can get an early ballot, they should do it. If they can get a mail-in ballot, they should do it. If they can take their mail-in ballot and drop it off at a location, they should do that. It's going to be incumbent on every single citizen this year to make sure that their vote counts. And that is where we are right now. I'm sorry to say. It is. I know when I started 2020, my calendar was full of celebrations that were going to happen to celebrate 19th Amendment. Well, of course, none of those happened except virtually. But I think it also helped us to realize just how many disparities still exist and how important it is for everybody to have. If there's one thing that we should all have, it should be an equal voice in deciding the votes. So, but nobody can do that for us. We have to do that for ourselves.
And I think, Gloria, it's also important for all of us to understand that each vote does count.
Oh boy, does it.
Even if we're living in a state that's not a swing state, right? And so there's still power that we have as individuals, even if we think otherwise.
That's so true. And I can't conjure up any right now, but just Google. Everybody just go Google elections that were won by one vote. And you're going to find a whole litany of them from top to bottom. And in addition to that, there's a lot more that we can do. And I know that voting is certainly the baseline, bottom line thing that really every citizen's responsibility is to vote. But you can also make phone calls for a candidate that you believe in. You can write postcards. You can talk to your neighbors. You can knock on doors. You can go help them in their office. There are so many things that you can do to help influence outcomes. And basically, we have this opportunity to participate actively, and it's fun. It's actually fun. It's actually fun to do that. You just don't realize how much impact you can have with the actions that you take.
And even at the town and city and state levels too, there's so much policy and so much positive impact that can happen just even by getting out there and volunteering with locally known groups as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the very interesting trends that's happening right now, and again to kind of go back to what's changed, is that so many women are running for those down ballot positions. And that's great because that's going to prepare them and position them to run for higher office as time goes on. But if you look at how many women are running for, say, county attorney general, school superintendents, constables, whatever, different states have different names for
mayors.
Yeah, mayors. Yes, mayors. Yes, right. There are many opportunities, and sometimes the school boards have huge impact. So I think that there's a really big trend toward women getting engaged in the political process firsthand. And that too will help to normalize women's leadership. And I think that will translate to having more women leaders in other areas as well.
Absolutely. And Gloria, I completely echo and second your comments about getting involved at the school board level as well, because you're absolutely right. And many years ago in my career, I also had experiences in that space as well. And I was amazed by the power that school boards have in the sense of shaping what children learn. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about the Equal Rights Amendment for a bit. We know that right. 38 states have ratified, but yet still here we are. Why is the ERA still important?
Well, I laugh because the first political contribution I ever made was to try to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed in Texas, where I was living at the time. And I can't even remember how many states initially passed. I think 35 states passed it pretty quickly. And then it was getting those last 3 states that took a long time. And no other amendment to the Constitution has been given a time limit. But one of the things that those who were opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment for women did was to put a time limitation on how long we could take to actually get it passed. And as a consequence, it sort of fizzled out. There was opposition, as there always is opposition to any progress is going to get opposed, and especially one that is as symbolically earth-shaking change. As if you think about it, full equality for women is like the most significant shift for social justice ever in the history of humanity, because it affects everybody. So it's quite profound. And so in the last few years, there have been these efforts, and we've gotten 3 more states passed. I would say I haven't been personally actively involved, although I am on the advisory committee for the ERA Coalition. So I certainly am supporting the efforts. But the reason it hasn't been written in a constitution yet is that despite having 38 states, the Senate will not bring it up for the final ratification to put it. We're going to have to get the time limit lifted, and that the Senate has not yet taken up. The House has done so. So all that remains is for the Senate to lift the time restriction, and the Equal Rights Amendment would then immediately be ratified into the Constitution. So it's just like one little thread that we now need to get.
Gloria, and let's be clear too that during that time, decades and decades ago, it wasn't a binary gender dispute in the sense of ratifying it or being in favor of it or being opposed to it, that many women actually opposed it as well. Phyllis Schlafly, for one, being one of the more outspoken critics of it. Mm-hmm. And do you think we've evolved tremendously from then to now?
Oh, not really. I think. I guess I would say not really. I would say it's the same forces at work. And the thing is that then, as now, the overwhelming majority, something like 90% of Americans, support the Equal Rights Amendment. But the 90% of Americans think that men and women ought to have an equal opportunity to live their lives and to have the careers they choose to have, and to just have equality under the law, simple equality, simple justice. It's not complicated. And so now some will make the argument now that so many gender equality laws have been passed since the 1970s that the ERA isn't needed anymore. But I say, well, then why not go ahead and pass it? Because what difference will it make to you? We've already got all those rights. Fine. Let's make sure that it's in the Constitution, because let's face it, when the Constitution was written, all the references were to men. Women couldn't even own property at that time, for the most part. And women weren't considered. I mean, there's nothing about women or gender in the original Constitution at all, despite Abigail Adams' admonition to her husband, John, to remember the ladies. He made fun of her. He laughed at her, and he said the men would not put up with such a tyranny of the petticoat. And so when he went to do his work on the Constitution, he didn't even pay any attention to his wife, Abigail, who was way ahead of her time. And we've had a lot to overcome. And most of it is, again, it is cultural. It is what's in our heads. And it's time to change that. It's time to change that. And actually, the thing is, when you look at it on a microcosmic level, don't we all want our daughters to have an equal chance? Don't we all want our daughters to be able to realize their dreams? Well, that's why you need an Equal Rights Amendment right there.
Beautifully stated, Gloria. I want to go back to something you were discussing earlier around intention. And let's have a conversation around the difference from your perspective between ambition and intention. And why does that matter right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, so what I realized when I was, as I've been doing a lot of teaching and doing classes and courses for women and trying to help them shift how they're thinking about power, I realized that the next step is I then have to ask the question about what are you going to use your power to? If you've embraced your power, for what? How do you plan on using it? And I came upon a lot of research that said women had less ambition than men. And I felt like it just instinctively that did not resonate with me. And I asked around, and I found a lot of women agreed that women have ambition, but what they lack is having the intention to use it for something that would put them into a leadership role. because, and again, it's all socialization. It is not hardwired. None of this is hardwired. So that's when I started making the distinction between ambition and intention. And we talked about women in politics, and I'll tell you that you will find almost always, if you ask a woman why she's running, she'll give you two answers. Number one, somebody asked me, and number two, because I saw something that I thought was wrong and needed to be fixed. You ask a man why he's running for office, it may just be largely because he wants the power of it. And he thinks he's qualified. And why not? So women have the ambition, but they won't take the intention unless they feel like there's really a need for them to do it. And so that's why I distinguish between ambition. So ambition is like the fuel. It gives you the idea, it gives you the hope, the want, the wish. But intention gives you the vision, the courage, the reason to take action, and the will to take action. With intention, you can see yourself in that role already. You know you can. You know you will. You can already see it happening. And that's the difference between ambition and intention.
Do you think that there's also a component of it where we know that it takes a village, and yet women often aren't socialized in the way in which men are, from being a part of a team, or knowing that you're only as good as the people underneath you, or that, inspire you, or that, that hold you up? Do you think that there's some truth in the sense of the way in which women now can use this time to embrace their networks and embrace their communities and embrace their inner circles and their tribes differently, to be able to help them get from the point of intention to ambition?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you said it very well. None of us does this alone. We do not do this alone. And very often we think we're the only ones and we're isolated and we have to solve our problem. But the truth is, we need to reach out to our sisters. We need to ask for help when we need it. We need to give help to others. And that can make all the difference. It's really it comes down to a mindset and a practice, and a recognizing that we do need each other. But think about the quilting bees and that was how women got together and did things. And was it the 1800s, I guess, it's like, so women have always found ways to collaborate and to do things together. But I think that in the rush of our daily lives, we often forget that it's a good thing to step back for a minute, breathe a little, think about, who are the people who can help me with this? Mm-hmm. Who are the people who maybe need my help and I should reach out to them? And one of the exercises that I do with women, it's what I call my power map. And I just put a bunch of little circles on a piece of paper, but the middle circle is the person who can do the most to advance your career where you want it to go. And then you put yourself wherever you are in relation to that person right now. And then you start filling in the other circles with other people. Maybe it's the person maybe it's your boss's boss's boss. Maybe it's the person that your boss went to high school with. Maybe it's, maybe it's your coworker. Maybe it's their pastor. I mean, you got to think about who influences the people who can influence your life. And then how do you nurture those relationships in a positive way? I'm not saying that in a cynical way. I'm saying it in a, how you probably already know those people. How long since you had a virtual coffee with them or found some way to reach out and just say hi? I mean, nurture, you have to nurture relationships. The world turns on human connection. Nothing happens without human connections. Never forget that. So that's really true for women. And the hardest thing sometimes is not to let ourselves get isolated and feel like we have to solve all our problems by ourselves. There really are people willing to help, and we are willing to help them.
Exactly. And I think it's all about asking, right? Because we are often socialized not to ask for help and not to take that risk. One woman told me recently that she's using this time each and every day to reach out to 3 new people. Like, she purposely schedules a meeting in her calendar with no other intention, no other distractions other than to reach out to 3 people that she hasn't spoken with since the pandemic started, that she, thanks to your point, Gloria, can help elevate her career. But she reaches out to them in a very human way because obviously she does want to connect with them and she wants to see how they're doing and to check in. But she's also doing it through the kind of the intersectionality of the personal and the professional, understanding that this is a new way to network right now. But I think that women have a leg up in how we think about networking. Because when you think about historically how men network, it's often over beers at a bar or at a game or at a sporting event, or they're playing golf together. We're masters at networking events, right? And so yes, we may miss the cocktail, we may miss the in-person and hugging and, et cetera, but there's something that I think that we excel at in the Zoom room.
Absolutely.
From how we're staying in contact with each other. It's brilliant.
It's really true. And there are many ways to do it. And it's good that you're bringing it up right now, because again, being in this pandemic situation, even if things are starting to open up in some places, is still limiting. It's still limited. There still is anxiety about going out and doing things in public spaces. But there is so much we can do, and we don't want to look back on this time and think, oh, I wish I had used that time to call those 3 people every day. I wish I had used that time to make sure that I caught up with my friend Jan. I wish that I had, I wish that I had helped my friend so-and-so who lost her job or was furloughed. You have to look at the opportunity that exists in whatever you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because for most of us now, we're at least month 5 into the pandemic. And when we think about so much has happened, but yet it's gone by pretty quickly. And, no matter if we've managed to stay healthy or if we've come down with COVID or if we've been furloughed or laid off or transitioned in our careers or reinvented or pivoted or whatever, insert whatever word, but the time goes by very quickly. And it is, I think, important, and I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Gloria, about using this time to really, take a step back and think about how you want to re-engage with yourself and re-engage with others too.
Right.
You talk a lot about the power in a woman's name, and I want to talk a bit about that too, and why that matters, and why does that matter for the work that you do?
Well, Toni Morrison said, if you know your name, you should hang on to it. Very smart. And what she meant was it's your identity, and it's how you'll get written into history. And so your name is also often, not always, but it is interesting to ask and find out what the origins are of the name that you were given. And for some people, for quite a few people, it has to do with their family history. For other people, it has to do with their cultural history. For some people, it was just because their parents liked the name, and it was kind of random. But whatever it is, it's your name, and it's the start of your identity, and it's how people start to respond to you. Actually, why there are some indigenous tribes that don't give a child a name until they start to see how the culture reacts to them. And then they give them, the name that seems to fit at that time. So your identity starts with your name. Symbolically for me, that has to do with what I call my power tool number 2, which is define your own terms first before someone else defines you. So we're all going to be defined. But isn't it better for us to decide how we want to show up in this world and how we want the world to perceive us than to let it simply happen to us? And so that for me is what focusing on how did you get your name, that question means.
And Gloria, as we know too, so many women's names have been scrubbed out and erased and deleted from history as well, and we know that that's happened. And some incredible women over time, over history, that should have gotten credit for some really incredible innovations and inventions and discoveries. And I think as we grow and we evolve just as human beings, we're learning more about those women. But I love what you said around claiming your name, and that's how you're going to be remembered in history, because now we do want to be remembered. We've always wanted to be remembered, but I think it's incredibly important now as we think about what does progress look like for women, the opportunity and the choice to be remembered.
Absolutely. And one thing women do is write. Women write a lot. So, we can write that history. It's in our blog posts, it's in our social media posts, it's in, we can be very intentional, as it were, about the messages that we're putting out. And actually that's another way that we can support each other as women. It's to, I hear Jan did something really, really cool. I'm going to post something about that on my Facebook page. We can elevate each other. I'm going to tell that person that is in the organization that she works for about this great thing that Jan did. And I'll bet you eventually that's going to come home to roost in a good way. So we can do small things like that really add up and really change the world for people. I know in my own life, I have never had a formal mentor, but I can look back and I can see the many people who saw more in me than I saw in myself. And they pushed me, pulled me, gave me assignments I would never have put my hand up for. So I wouldn't be where I am if it hadn't been for those people. We can all do that for somebody.
We absolutely can. I love that idea. And social media is the perfect place to do that, no matter if you're a LinkedIn fan or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I love TikTok.
Another one I have to learn. Oh my goodness.
But it's interesting how, technology, I think sometimes we think of as a blessing and a curse. And in many ways, we're all kind of tech challenged and we're all kind of learning how to fumble through all of this together as we do more and more and more online. And let's face it, the digital world's not going away, and figuring out how to embrace it and really use it as we continue to celebrate ourselves. And honestly, Gloria, I think, I think the phrase personal branding is incredibly overused. But in a way, no matter what we do and no matter how we define our career, there is an element of truth that as you show up now to the world matters more so than ever, because we don't have as much face-to-face interaction and opportunity for that than before.
Right. So true. Yes.
I want to ask you one question about the complex nature of identity, because at Mayshad, we talk a lot about identity and how gender is not just a binary construct and race is not just a binary construct, nor is sexuality or ethnicity or nationality or age, but we often make it as such. And we know that the women's rights movements have had a checkered history of whom and to whom it doesn't speak to. Let's have a conversation about that. And do you think, given the inequalities that have come to light in such an incredible way because of COVID, and honestly, many of the things that were bubbling to the surface pre-COVID, how will that be different? How could that be different? And how we define what does feminism look like today and beyond?
I am really, really optimistic in seeing the kind of racial justice reckoning that's happening right now. I mean, as somebody who basically got started in social movements in the civil rights movement of the 60s, it's kind of in my DNA. And so I hadn't really, it just never wasn't there in my thinking. And yet I really appreciate all of the issues that are being brought to light now about there are so many subtle and not so subtle ways that there hasn't been justice for everybody. And I think, life has not gotten less complicated. There are many identities now that whoever heard of them, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. Life was simpler, but life is not intended to be simple. It is. Nobody said it was going to be easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy. And there is room, and we all have room in our hearts for everybody. And we are all healthier when we have room in our hearts for everybody. But I really think that as hard as it is right now, that the racial justice reckoning is extremely important opportunity for all women to come together in total intersectionality of all whatever our identities might be. And we are all in this together. we will all succeed or we will none of us succeed. We will all prevail or none of us will prevail. I mean, we are in a moment where we have this opportunity. I mean, again, the positive side of a pandemic that creates chaos for everybody is that in chaos, the boundaries are malleable and you can make changes that you could never make in a more stable time. So as challenging as it might be, and I know that it is, I mean, it is every day we see something that can just break our hearts and make us angry. And take that. We need to take that energy and use it toward more justice for more people.
Love that, Gloria. Thank you. One couple of final questions for you. So a trip down memory lane, you and I met many, 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 many years ago.
many, 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 many years ago. I gave some away by saying, you know, I've been involved in the civil rights movement. And, so I kind of gave a lot of that away. You aren't as old as I am, so don't claim that.
You were the CEO of the Planned Parenthood affiliate of Arizona, and I served on the Leadership Development Committee. And well, that was many years ago. And then you rose to become the president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And I became eventually the CFO of International Planned Parenthood. So we have many different social justice issues in common and that we hold near and dear to our heart in the sense of how we think about women's equality and the empowerment of women and children. I would love to hear from you one or two of your most rewarding moments serving as president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America.
Well, my probably most rewarding moment was getting contraceptive equity legislation passed. And so I often just say, and if your birth control is now paid for by your insurance, you're welcome. I mean, I didn't start the whole thing because I'm really good at seeing a good idea and elevating it to where it needs to be. And so it is an issue that had started bubbling up in the States. But I could see that it was a national issue that women would rally around regardless of party, because 90% of Americans use birth control. Most people didn't even think about the fact that their insurance covered everything else, but it didn't cover their birth control, and that they were paying $30 to $50 a month out of pocket for something that, in all fairness, should have been treated like other prescriptions that they had. So I would say that that would be one of my very best moments was I had actually been to Seneca Falls for the 150th anniversary of the Women's Rights Conference. And I got home and my phone was ringing and it was my DC team saying, turn on CNN right this minute. All of the women of the House and the Senate were together in front of the Capitol steps supporting contraceptive equity. And that was just one of the best moments ever. That was totally an iconic moment for me. Also, I would say that having helped to organize the biggest march that ever happened in Washington prior to the Women's March in 2017, that was pretty cool too. In 2004, that was a pretty good day. That was a pretty good day. There were so many people behind me that we were on the front line. We were supposed to start at like 11:30, and by 11 o'clock, there was so much pressure from behind. We had to just move, and that was really cool. That was very cool. There were things like that. There were a lot of things like that. But for me, I will have to say that even now, and this still happens, when somebody says to me, "You saved my life," I know what they mean. I was a teen mom. I had all my kids by the time I was 20. I know that the birth control pill saved my life. And so my commitment to making sure that all women and men have the ability to responsibly plan and space their childbearing so that they can take good care of the children they have and have healthy lives is, to me, that's a fundamental. And when you have that, then you can become economically self-sufficient. And when you're economically self-sufficient, you don't have to stay in an abusive situation. You can control the rest of your life. So for me, it's much bigger than much bigger than the work of Planned Parenthood. It really is about women's place in the world and whether we will have an equal chance to be unlimited.
To be unlimited. Gloria, I could not agree more. I absolutely thank you from the bottom of my heart, and many, many, many millions of women around the country and around the world who thank you for your service and your dedication, your passion, and for keeping the fight alive, honestly. So 2 final questions very quickly.
Okay.
When we meet again in 4 years, where do you hope that we'll be as a country?
Okay. In 4 years, we will have ERA. In 4 years, it will be almost to 2025. So we will be very close to having gender parity in leadership. And that would be enough.
Love that. Final question. I've seen you in red now for quite a while, and I'm wearing red today in your honor because I knew that this is Gloria Feldt Day. What is the story behind the color red? Why is it of significance to you?
Well, red has always been one of my favorite colors, and I always wore a lot of, actually, I just always wore a lot of bright colors. Actually, when at my going away party at Planned Parenthood Federation, my entire team showed up wearing either red or hot pink jackets. So I guess I had sort of branded myself already. But I have this fetish that whenever I publish a book, whatever the main color on that book cover is, I wear that color all the time when I'm promoting the book. And since the last book I wrote was No Excuses, and the cover of the trade paperback, which I actually like better than the hardcover version, is red. I started wearing red 10 years ago when it came out, and I've never stopped. And now I have almost nothing else in my closet. So.
I love it because, I mean, for me, it exudes so much passion and warmth and seriousness and ambition and intention. Like everything we've spoken about today, it's the perfect color to symbolize who you are and what you represent and your passion, your mission. Gloria, thank you so much for being with us here today. We'd love to have you back as we move forward the next 4 years as well, or not even waiting 4 years, but I'm sure that we'll have a lot to talk about in the next 6 to 9 months as well.
Thank you, Jan. I love what you and Mayshad are doing. So I hope that we will have a lot of opportunity to work together.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching us today. I'm Jan Dams, the Vice President of U.S. Development with Join Mayshad. Again, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out at joinmayshad.com. And we would love to have you join us as together we revolutionize how professional women connect, engage, and do business together. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.